The minimum wage here where I live, which is in South Texas, is $7.25 an hour. Um, that applies to all type of fields, but obviously, if someone, maybe an engineer or a doctor, is hired, they're not gonna um, be paid that wage. Obviously, because their job is not replaceable. Because of that, their job requires tacit knowledge, which is something we went over last semester. Um, if let's say I ran a business, to answer the question, the second question, if I ran a business, um, how would I address the issue of minimum wages? If I was paying them above that wage, I probably would have less workers to make sure I'm making a profit. But if I'm paying them above wage, I'm sure they're completing something that cannot be done by your average Joe. If I'm paying them below the wage, it's probably because they're doing a very simple task. Something simple, maybe as cleaning the toilet, or something that doesn't require too much force or too much energy or too much time. And to answer question 3 and 4, if there was an increase, a mandated increase in the minimum wage, and it would not be expected to cause a large decrease in unemployment, is probably because they know they can afford that increase in the minimum wage, or it just wouldn't affect them, or the minimum wage is very low compared to the times that we are in. And let's say it was increased, and let's say the minimum wage was increased, and there was a large decrease in unemployment, is probably because the company couldn't afford it, or maybe the company was in rough times, or they had to lay off a lot of people because they couldn't afford to pay for everybody. So they would have less workers, but more workers are being paid with a higher wage. When I first heard about the minimum wage here where I live in was probably when I first started looking for a job when I was 15, 16. I was researching jobs, fast food retail, in my neighborhood, not my neighborhood, but in my community, and seeing what the starting wage was, or the minimum wage was, and it was $7.25. I was a bit surprised because in other places, I know it's $10, or it's even $15, which is double what it is here. So I was a bit unmotivated to work here and move somewhere else. But I guess living here is a bit cheaper than other places where the minimum wage is a bit higher. So I guess it does weigh itself out. So honestly, I don't. The minimum wage in all places should be dependent on the living prices, or the living standards, or the living cost of their respected communities or the respected areas. Like I said, the minimum wage here is $7.25, but then you can find very cheap apartments for $400, $500, $600. Whereas in a place where the minimum wage is 15, the prices in apartments range from maybe 800-900 plus. So I think like I said, it weighs itself out. But I do still think the minimum wage should be raised in places where it's $7.25. I think we need to keep up with times, and things are getting more expensive. Products are becoming more expensive. Even produce, organic produce, which is something we went over last semester, is more expensive. So I think it should be fair to raise the minimum wage in places where the minimum wage is at an all-time low, I should say. since I believe what my stance is currently on the minimum wage is that it should be increased. A argument against that position will probably be there's no reason to increase it because it's been well off for the past few years. Well, quote unquote, well off. The past few years, and people have been able to get good prices on apartments, good prices on other things in their communities because of those low wage, those minimum low wages. So it evens itself out, and this also applies to cities where the minimum wage is $15. It's fair. The prices in their communities, in their areas, is fair to what they're getting paid to. To answer question 9, I hope they would be able to reason that it is 2020. Things are getting more expensive. Maybe things that are a set price amongst the whole nation, something that doesn't change price to price from different cities. So it's easier for someone who has a minimum wage of $15 to buy that as opposed to someone who it works the same amount of hours, the same amount or the same job as someone who gets paid $15 and they get paid $7.50, and it be hard for them to obtain that good or service. So it really isn't fair. If they're working the same job, the same amount of hours, and putting the same effort, let's say they're both cashiers at McDonald's, but one of them is able to get it faster than the other one because one of them is getting paid twice as much. It doesn't seem fair. When the topic, to answer question 10, whenever the topic about minimum wage, one automatically attaches that to topics or arguments concerning employment and unemployment and the impacts or the lack of impacts, right? And people might make this argument in order to really show the impact that it could have. It could either dramatically increase or dramatically decrease the amount of people employed in a certain place. Let's say the minimum wage is increased by $1 or $2 at a company, and it somehow the company can't afford that $1 or $2 increase in the wage, then then it is a right, I guess, to say. I'm sorry. It's okay for them to be concerned over that impact, that unemployment or employment impact, because it's a valid reason, but it, like Professor Rizzo says, it totally misses about. I think what he means by that is that there's something bigger out there than that company not being able to afford it. Maybe they can. Maybe they just need to allocate their funds towards something else to the workers. But maybe that's just an argument that what someone can make. To answer question 11, I think there's a big difference in a minimum wage and a living wage. Maybe what should be taken into consideration into finding that well-designed minimum wage is by evaluating and calculating the prices of goods and services in those regions, in those areas where those people live, and finding that perfect living wage where they'll be well off, right? Maybe not well off. Well, yeah, well off. So and for them to be in situations where they don't have to worry about whether they're going to pay their light bill or their water bill or their apartment or their car or not have money for gas. They should be well off in terms of having the money or the financial capabilities of paying everything off and still have a little bit of money left for themselves. That would be considered living wage for me. So in order to do that, they calculate the best prices in that area, and find a way to match it, find that living wage. And of course, in every different area, every area will be different because prices are different. Like how I said, for example, again, here in Texas, it's very different. South Texas is very different from New York. So we'd find maybe $10 is a perfect price living wage here. And in New York, instead of 15, it should be $18, right? They find that living wage for their respective regions. To answer question 13, I actually don't know what the number one labor market cause of poverty is. It probably is maybe something as absurd as the minimum wage being too high, or I think it's something absurd like that. Maybe some companies can't afford to pay off or pay more people that minimum wage, so they classify that as the number one labor market cause of poverty. So to answer question 14, if I have to pay them more, but I evidently cannot, I would have to lay off some people, even though they might be the nicest people I've ever met. Sometimes it sounds a bit rough to say, but you have to put your personal aside. I'm sorry, I can't remember how that saying goes. Like your everything personal aside and keep like business up front. So obviously it would hurt me, but if I can't afford it, or if it's gonna hurt the company in some way, unless I could allocate some funds to that wage, to the increase in wage, then I would do that. But if there's no way to pay that much to all my workers, then I would have to lay them off. If we do all agree to raise the minimum wage, they won't just raise it. I think it goes through a longer process than that, right? And but let's say it is as simple as us agreeing to raise the minimum wage, and they listen. Why is it okay for the firms to pay for it all? Maybe it's because it is well needed, and the firms are making huge profits and overworking their people. I think if it's a reasonable amount, right, and it seems that it's needed in the community or wherever that increase is, then it is fair and it is okay for the firms to pay for it all. And well, it shouldn't be paid by the taxpayer, because us taxpayers are the ones who are stuck with that burden, that financial burden of all the things we have to pay for already, that overpriced things that those firms make it their products to be. So we're just asking for our money back in some sense. To answer question 17, I wouldn't give up any other social welfare policy to see my minimum wage program idea implemented, because we already are struggling. It's not like we have that universal health care or many other things that other countries have that help their citizens as opposed to the United States. So I would like to be able to see America pay their people, their citizens, a living wage where they're able to sustain themselves, not be living day by day, penny by penny. So, no, I wouldn't give up or offer up any social welfare policy in order to see the minimum wage program that I suggested for it to be implemented. I think asking for a living wage is fair and should also be seen as a humane thing to do. And to finish off with question 17, the correct or optimal minimum wage is, like I said, that finding that living wage for different regions for people to be able to live off peacefully and without any financial burden in their mind or carrying any type of financial load. I think that would be the best optimal correct wage, living wage. And obviously it all is different depending on where you live, because prices are different in different cities.